Lila wiped a counter, her thoughts on her mother, wasting away in a sterile room, and her brother, sketching superheroes in a notebook, dreaming of a future she couldn't yet give him. She didn't notice the door swing open, didn't see the man who strode in until he dropped into a booth, his presence sucking the air from the room. He was tall, broad, with a shaved head and tattoos, skulls, snakes, flames, crawling up his arms and neck. His leather jacket reeked of cigarettes, and his eyes, cold as steel, fixed on Lila with a smirk that made her stomach twist. "Beer, sweetheart," he said, voice dripping with menace. "And make it quick." She nodded, forcing a smile, though her hands shook as she turned away. She'd handled rude customers before, but this guy was different. His gaze felt like a threat. She set the beer down, careful not to meet his eyes. "Anything else?" she asked, voice steady despite her racing heart. He leaned forward, close enough for her to smell the stale smoke on his breath. "Yeah," he said, grinning. "How about you keep me company?" His words were laced with a cruel edge, and Lila's skin prickled. She mumbled an excuse, stepping back, but he grabbed her wrist, his grip tight. "Don't run off now," he said louder, drawing eyes from nearby tables. Old Man Jenkins glanced up from his pie but looked away fast. The truckers kept their heads down, their forks scraping plates. Lila's cheeks burned, her pulse hammering as she pulled free and hurried to another table, pretending to check orders. But she felt his stare, heavy and unyielding, following her every move. Minutes later, as she cleared empty plates, he struck. She was near his booth, stacking dishes, when he stood, towering over her. "You think you're too good for me?" he sneered, voice loud enough to hush the diner. Before she could react, his hand shot out, grabbing her uniform shirt. With one brutal yank, he tore it open, the fabric ripping with a sickening sound. Lila gasped, stumbling back, clutching the torn cloth to cover herself. Her face flushed with shock and humiliation, tears stinging her eyes as she backed toward the counter. "Stop!" she cried, her voice breaking. The stranger laughed, a harsh, guttural sound, and stepped closer. "Let's see who can save you," he taunted, his words echoing in the stunned silence. No one moved, the regulars, the truckers, even the cook peeking from the kitchen. They all froze, fear gluing them to their seats. Lila's world shrank to a pinpoint of panic. She wanted to scream, to run, but her legs felt like lead. Her mind flashed to her mother, who'd raised her to be strong, and her brother, who looked up to her. She couldn't fall apart, not now, not ever. But the stranger's laughter clawed at her, and the diner's silence felt like betrayal. Why wasn't anyone helping? She backed into the counter, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge, tears spilling down her cheeks. The stranger leaned in, his smirk widening, relishing her fear. "Nobody's coming for you, sweetheart," he said, voice low and cruel. "You're nothing." Outside, the growl of motorcycles grew louder, closer. Through the diner's open window, the sound cut through the tension like a warning. Jack Iron Malone, a grizzled man in his 40s with a scarred face and a leather vest patched with Hell's Angels insignia, sat on his bike, his crew parked beside him. Their bikes gleamed under the streetlights, chrome catching the neon glow. Jack was no hero. His life was a blur of bar fights, open roads, and a past he didn't talk about. But his eyes, sharp and steady, caught the scene inside. He saw Lila's tear-streaked face, the stranger's sneer, the torn shirt. His jaw tightened, and he stubbed out his cigarette on the pavement. "Nobody treats a lady like that," he muttered, his voice low but firm on his right. Tessa, a wiry biker with a buzz cut and a fire in her eyes, leaned forward on her bike. "That guy's trouble, Jack," she said, her voice tight. "She's just a kid." The other bikers, Rusty, Bear, and Snake, each with their own scars and stories, nodded, their faces hard. They weren't saints. They'd skirted the law more times than they could count. But something about Lila's vulnerability, The way she stood alone against that creep hit a nerve. Jack's mind flickered to his sister, a memory he kept buried. A girl he couldn't save years ago. He shook it off, his resolve hardening. "We're going in," he said, swinging off his bike. The others followed, their boots heavy on the asphalt, their leather creaking. Inside, Lila fled to the back room, her breath hitching as she slammed the door. She sank to the floor, clutching a spare apron to cover herself, tears streaming down her face. Her mind raced with memories, her mother's frail hands, her brother's hopeful smile, the art supplies she'd sold to pay bills. She'd always been the strong one, the one who kept going. But now she felt small, exposed, powerless. The stranger's voice echoed through the thin walls, bragging to a customer. "She's nothing. Nobody cares." Each word was a dagger, twisting deeper. Lila wiped her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. She had to go back out. She needed this job, needed every tip to keep her family afloat. But the thought of facing him again made her stomach lurch. She cracked the door, peering out. The stranger was still there, sprawled in his booth, laughing as if he owned the place. The other customers avoided his gaze, their silence deafening. Lila's heart sank. How could they just sit there? She felt like she was drowning, the weight of her fear pulling her under. Then the diner's door burst open, the bell jangling violently. Heavy footsteps echoed, and a deep voice cut through the air like thunder. "You got a problem with picking on someone half your size?" It was Jack, his broad frame filling the doorway, his crew behind him, their eyes locked on the stranger. The tattooed man turned, his smirk faltering for the first time. Lila's breath caught, hope flickering in her chest, but fear lingered. What if this turned into something worse? The stranger stood, squaring his shoulders, trying to hold his ground. "Mind your own business, biker," he spat, but his voice wavered. Jack didn't flinch, his scarred face unreadable, his presence commanding the room. Tessa stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "You don't get to hurt people and walk away," she said, her voice sharp. The other bikers fanned out, their stance calm but ready, like wolves circling prey. The diner's air crackled with tension, every customer watching, barely breathing. Lila peeked from the back, her heart pounding. These bikers, rough and intimidating, were standing up for her when no one else would. But the stranger's cruel words echoed in her mind. "Let's see who can save you." She clutched the apron tighter, torn between hope and dread. Would these strangers be her salvation? Or would their intervention spark a fire no one could control? The air in Rosie's diner crackled like a storm about to break. Jack, Iron Malone, stood tall, his scarred face unyielding. His Hell's Angels crew fanned out behind him, their leather vests creaking as they faced the tattooed stranger. The man's smirk had faded, replaced by a scowl as he sized up the bikers. "You think you scare me?" he spat, shoving a table aside, its metal legs scraping the floor. His voice was loud, but a tremor betrayed his bravado. Lila Carter, still clutching a spare apron to cover her torn shirt, peeked from the back room, her heart pounding. The stranger's cruel words, "Let's see who can save you," still echoed in her mind. But the sight of these rough strangers standing up for her sparked a flicker of courage. She wiped her tears, her breath steadying. She wasn't alone anymore. Jack's voice was calm but firm, cutting through the tension. "Apologize to the lady. Now." His words weren't a request, they were a command. The stranger laughed, a harsh, nervous sound, and stepped forward, fists clenched. "You don't tell me what to do, biker." The diner's regulars, frozen in their booths, held their breath. Old Man Jenkins clutched his coffee mug, his knuckles white. The truckers exchanged uneasy glances, their forks stilled. Lila's pulse raced. She wanted to run, to hide, but something inside her shifted. She couldn't let fear win, not after everything she'd fought for. Taking a shaky breath, she stepped out from the back, her voice trembling but clear. "You don't get to make me feel small," she said, staring the stranger down. The room gasped, and even Jack's eyes flickered with surprise. The stranger's face twisted, his confidence cracking. You? He sneered, but his voice faltered as Lila stood her ground, her chin high despite the apron clutched to her chest. Tessa, the wiry biker with a buzz cut, stepped beside Jack, her eyes blazing. She's got more guts than you, she said, her words sharp as a blade. You mess with her, you mess with us. The other bikers, Rusty, Bear, and Snake, closed ranks, their presence a wall of strength. The stranger's bravado crumbled, his shoulders hunching as he realized he was outnumbered. But his pride wouldn't let him back down. You don't know who I am, he growled, his voice low, almost desperate. I've got nothing left to lose. Lila's heart twisted, not with pity, but with a flicker of understanding. The man's eyes, for a moment, betrayed a hollowness, a pain that fueled his cruelty. She thought of her own struggles, her mother's hospital bed, her brother's dreams, the weight of every bill she paid. But she'd never used her pain to hurt others. That's no excuse, she said softly, her voice steady now. You chose to hurt me. Jack nodded, his gaze never leaving the stranger. She's right. Your problems don't give you a free pass. He stepped closer, his voice low but piercing. You got one chance to make this right. The stranger's defiance flared, and he lunged at Jack, his fist swinging. But the bikers were faster. Rusty and Bear grabbed his arms, pinning him without a punch thrown. The stranger struggled, cursing, but their grip was iron. Jack didn't move, his calm unnerving. We don't want to fight, he said. We want justice. He jerked his head toward Lila. Say you're sorry. Mean it. The stranger's eyes darted around, finding no allies in the silent diner. His shoulders slumped, his fight draining away. Fine, he muttered, his voice barely audible. I'm sorry. Lila met his gaze, her heart still racing but her spirit stronger. I hope you find a better way, she said, her words firm yet kind, a quiet power in them that silenced the room. The bikers released him, and Jack pointed to the door. Get out. Don't come back. The stranger stumbled toward the exit, his swagger gone, his tattoos seeming to fade under the diner's harsh lights. As the door slammed behind him, the room erupted in applause, the sound washing over Lila like a wave. Old Man Jenkins clapped her shoulder, his eyes misty. The truckers nodded, respect in their gazes. Lila's chest swelled. She'd faced her fear, and these strangers, these unlikely heroes, had stood by her. Tessa grinned, nudging her. You're tougher than you look, kid. Lila managed a small smile, her hand still shaking but her heart lighter. Jack approached, pulling off his leather jacket and draping it over her shoulders to cover the torn shirt. The gesture was simple but heavy with kindness, the worn leather warm against her skin. For your trouble, he said, setting a stack of bills on the counter, enough to cover the stranger's tab and more. Lila's eyes widened, but before she could protest, Tessa spoke up. We've all been down, Lila, she said, her voice softer now. Doesn't make us saints, but we know right from wrong. Jack's gaze softened, a flicker of pain crossing his face, as if he saw someone else in Lila. A sister, a memory he didn't share. Keep your head up, he told her, then turned to his crew. Let's roll. The bikers strode out, their boots echoing, their bikes roaring to life outside, fading into the night. Lila stood behind the counter, the jacket still around her shoulders, its weight grounding her. The applause had faded, but the diner felt different, warmer, alive. She thought of the night's terror, the stranger's cruelty, and how she'd found her voice. She wasn't just a waitress scraping by. She was a fighter, stronger than she'd known. The next morning, she pulled out her old sketchbook, her fingers tracing lines of a new drawing. A biker's silhouette against a neon glow, a tribute to the unexpected kindness that had changed her. The regulars noticed her spark, rallying around her with extra tips and kind words, promising to look out for her. For the first time in years, Lila felt part of something bigger, a community that saw her strength as she poured coffee under the diner's flickering lights. Her smile was real, her heart full. The night had been a nightmare, but it had shown her she wasn't alone. Heroes, she realized, didn't always wear capes. Sometimes they wore leather and rode Harleys. The jukebox played on, and outside, the road stretched into the dark, carrying the echo of those bikes and the promise of hope.